is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Raw Prospect Podcast. This is episode 105. And joining me from Austin, Texas, the Stat King himself, Mr. Michael Wing. What is up, man?
What is up? Welcome back, everyone, to what should hopefully be after a somewhat long hiatus of about 3 weeks from recording podcasts after conflicting schedules, end of the semester, all that shit. Welcome back to what should hopefully be regularly scheduled programming here on the Raw Prospect Podcast. We have a lot to cover today. Just a little preview. We're going to be talking about our prospect of the week. Then we're going to talk about the conference finals and what's happened so far in that. We got a lot to get to there. And then it's almost Memorial Day. We're about a quarter of the way in terms of games to the MLB regular season. So we're going to check in on the standings, talk about what we've seen so far, disappointing teams that look like contenders, all that crap. And then we'll just continue to record at least once a week, maybe even twice a week in some weeks. So just be looking out for content. Make sure to follow us on Twitter as well. You can find our Twitters here on the screen. We have an Instagram account as well and a Twitter account. So follow us on social media and share the podcast with your friends as we try to continue to grow. But welcome back.
Yeah. Let's just get right into this prospect of the week, man. I mean, a lot has happened in the sports world. I mean, it's been 3 weeks of playoff basketball, of regular season baseball, which is, in baseball, 3 weeks is a lot of games. So a ton has happened. The WNBA season is underway as well. So let's just get right into this. I'm going to start out first, I guess. We're going to give 2 prospects of the week this week just to make up for some of the time lost. And my first player is going to be Jimmy Butler. I just think it's time to talk about Jimmy Butler as the all-time great player that he has become. I mean, when talking about top 10 players in the NBA, he's rarely mentioned, yet time and time again, we see his teams in the playoffs and competing for a championship year after year. Last year, obviously, he had that little hiccup of obviously getting swept in the first round by the Bucks, who eventually won the championship. But, I mean, he's been extremely consistent as a playoff performer. And I just love him because he does whatever is needed that day. Like, he's a very moment-oriented person. Like, he will do whatever is needed in that moment for his team. And that's something that you can say very rarely about star players across the league. There's stars that will get their stats no matter what. They want to get their numbers. But Jimmy Butler just wants to win. And he's a future Hall of Famer because of it. And he has his team 2 wins away from the NBA Finals.
Go ahead and give your second one, and then I'll talk about mine.
Okay. My second prospect of the week is going to be Al Horford. Al Horford is currently on the Celtics. Obviously, he's in the latter stages of his career. He's 35 years old in his second stint with the Celtics. And the numbers don't jump off the page for the career that he's had, but the resurgence that he's had this year and in these playoffs has been not only significant, but it has been vital for these Boston Celtics, considering they went without Robert Williams for much of the first 2 rounds and a bunch of this round as well. He's given elite defense on all-time great players, Giannis Antetokounmpo being the main one, and obviously at times on Kevin Durant switching in that system. But just his leadership, it's clear the impact that he has on this team. Obviously, there's there's been a revitalized toughness with this Boston Celtics team. I think a lot of that has to do with obviously their new coach Ime Udoka, but it also has to do with the leadership in that locker room that comes from guys like Al Horford. And I just think he needed a little bit of a moment in the sun, and I think I'm happy to give that to him, considering how well he's played in these playoffs.
That's a great way to kick us off. The All NBA teams were announced, I believe it was yesterday, and there were no signs of Jimmy Butler on either of the three All NBA teams. And you're going to tell me that there are 15 players in this league that are more impactful, more or just better than Jimmy Butler. I don't know. That's not really what it comes down to at the end of the day. But in my opinion, he should have been deserving of a look there. And then, of course, Al Horford. He does so many things that go unrecognized for the Boston Celtics. But I won't hit on that too much. We're going to talk about that series here in a couple minutes. So we'll hit on that when we get to it. For my prospects of the week, or the past couple weeks, there are so many options. I'll start in the NBA. Luka Doncic. Sorry to steal your thunder. Look, elimination game Luka Doncic is becoming a thing. I don't know if you've noticed, but I mean, you've probably noticed, but the casual NBA fan probably doesn't know that he is now averaging, and he's played in 5 elimination playoff games to this point in his career. He's averaging close to 37 points per game in those elimination games, 36.6 points per game to be exact. And that right now ranks as the most in NBA history, right ahead of LeBron James by actually a couple points. LeBron, I know he's played in more games, bigger sample size, but 33.5 points per game. And, Luka does all the things that LeBron sort of does in that he's a floor general. He makes his team better. He, shares the ball, all that sort of stuff. So it's becoming a thing. And last night he had another fantastic game. We'll get to that in a minute. Last night was actually the 3rd time in his young career. I mean, what is he? 22? I mean, he can't be much older than that, if that. That he led both teams outright in points, rebounds, and assists in an elimination game in the playoffs. LeBron is the only player with more. He's had 5 such games where he leads both teams in points, rebounds, and assists in an elimination game. He's done it 5 times, and he's played in the league for 19 years. Luka, what is this? His 3rd or 4th year, and he's already done it 3 times. So, I guess that could be a good thing and a bad thing. Playing in a lot of elimination games isn't necessarily what you want to do, but at the same time, when you're this good in those situations, it deserves recognition. So good for Luka Doncic. I could certainly make an argument that he's now a top 3-4 player in the NBA, but we'll get to that later. My second prospect of the week, I think this is a repeat prospect of the week. We go to college baseball ranks where the postseason has now begun. And Ivan Melendez, the first baseman and the DH for the Texas Longhorns. They call him the Hispanic Titanic for a reason. 22-22. What did I just say? 22-22. 2020. A 421 batting average. Understand that is across 56 games. A 421 batting average. That ranks 2nd in the country. Okay. 85 RBIs. That led the Big 12 Conference, and it ranks 2nd in the country. 28 home runs. Ties a single-season Texas Longhorn record. Okay, 28 home runs across 56 games. That's basically a home run every 2 games. I mean, that's just ridiculous. That's a Texas Longhorns regular season record, and that ranks 1st in the country. and a 1.472 OPS. That's on base percentage plus slugging. You add them together, you get the OPS. Okay, it's a very telling metric of what you are as a hitter. He's got a 1.472 OPS. Understand that currently in Major League Baseball, and I know this is not a perfect comparison because pitching is all around better in Major League Baseball, and offense has been down so far this season. It's been up recently, but overall, so far this season, when you go all the way back to the past couple of years, offense has been down lately, and pitching has gotten a lot better. But understand that the average Major League hitter right now, oh shit,
No, keep going. You're good.
the average Major League hitter in the MLB right now has an average OPS of .742. Okay, double that and you get Ivan Melendez's OPS. That ranks first in the country. I go in to this postseason knowing that this Texas baseball team has a chance because Ivan Melendez, he bats third in this lineup, and every couple games he's going deep, and he's making a huge impact. And look, he's not incredible defensively. He's a first baseman. There's not really much to be said there, but he does the job. So incredible player, and hopefully we'll get to talking college baseball here soon as the conference tournaments have started, and the real tournament will start in about a week. And we'll talk about that when it comes. Those are my prospects of.
Yeah. I had recently went on the way back from the golf course the other day. I had the Texas baseball game on, and when I heard that Melendez had broke the record, I believe, for home runs in a season at like 30 or something like that. Is that correct?
He tied the record.
Tied the
28.
record.
Right.
Okay, right. Um, I mean, this dude is unbelievable. I haven't watched much college baseball this year, but every time that I've tuned into a game, he like in games that he wasn't even involved in, he's been mentioned as the guy, the face of college baseball. So um, it'll be interesting to see where he goes in the MLB, whether he makes it to the big leagues right away or whether he'll be in a farm system somewhere. But no matter the case, he's going to be an amazing player.
Right. So
Okay,
that
let's talk some NBA now. Let's transition over now. Um, okay, so let's talk conference finals. So we're 4 games in each of these series. Uh, in the Western Conference, the Warriors currently lead 3-1 after the Mavericks win last night at the time of recording. And then in the Eastern Conference, that series is currently tied 2-2. So let's go ahead and start with the Western Conference and save the best for last here. Um, what has been your takeaways so far in that series? What key schematic things have you seen? And just give your overall observations for the series so far.
well, I think when you look at the series, it's been a classic example of what the Warriors have been. I don't know why. My thing is echoing. You know? I don't know why that's happening.
Maybe your mic is picking it up twice. I'm not too sure why that would be the case. Here, I'll go ahead and make and do mine while you're trying to figure that out. Okay, I can start with the Western Conference here. So obviously, as you guys know, I am a Mavericks fan, um, and you know, after we won Game 7 in the Sun series, that's another thing that we haven't talked about over these last few weeks. I mean, I was very optimistic going into this series. Um, Previously, I had picked the Suns to win that series in six, and I didn't really see a outcome where we beat them. But with like I went into that series with the understanding of if we can beat this team, we can beat anyone. And since we did beat the Suns, and especially in the way that we did it in a game seven with everybody locked in, and just blowing them out, I felt like exponentially more optimistic about this series. Um, but then game one started, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is a different beast. I had picked the Mavericks in six, um, because I felt like that was the only way we would be able to win the series. I just didn't see a outcome where we would be able to finish the job in a seventh game in San Francisco, with the way that crowd gets involved. Whoa, don't know what that was. Okay, in the way that they play on their home floor. So okay, just the key observation really is just the motion and the way that the Warriors run their offense. It presented an entirely different challenge for Dallas. And what I mean by that is just the cutting and the constant movement. It's so much harder to stay connected with these shooters, because the Suns, they have a certain way that they run their offense and they stick to that the entire game. But with the Warriors, there's no one possession that's the same. It's a different defensive challenge every time. They have certain sets that they run, but there's also never a time where players aren't moving around and moving the ball around. With the Suns, it was their high pick and roll with Booker and Paul, and then guys would spot up in the corners and on the wings, and that was their offense. They would have everything based upon that. They would have their movement where they would have the wing player in the opposite side on the weak side, switch side with the weak side corner player, but that's not really the type of movement that you know it's not really the type of movement that the Warriors have had, and that's something that I should have foreseen going into the series. But um, you know, I won't make that mistake again. This Warriors team is battle tested and they're championship ready, and they're champions for a reason. Um, this is a team that's been there and done that. So I just think overall, it was good that we won that last game last night. Not just to not get swept and have a little bit to build off of going into next season, and knowing that we can make the deep playoff run. And no matter what happens the rest of the series, it's been a successful year for the Mavericks.
I agree. Okay, I think I got the echo issue figured out. Anyways, yeah, I just think, I think that's a great point you brought up, and it actually goes back to something I heard uh, Kevin O'Connor and Chris Vernon talking about on the Mismatch podcast, which is one of my favorite NBA podcasts to listen to. The way the Suns play basketball offensively, this is what you brought up, is very different than the way the Warriors play. There's a lot of motion, a lot of off-ball movement with the Warriors, and there's more sort of isolation-based basketball with the Suns, and it's easier to defend that type of basketball. But I thought, last night the Mavericks did a better job with that. Luka's, of course, going to get his. In Game 3, we saw the supporting cast of the Mavericks, and three-point shooting has been a big factor in this series. There's no doubt about it. We saw the Mavericks go cold from three-point range. I believe that Reggie Bullock, Maxi Kleba, and I think it was Dorian Finney-Smith went a combined 2 of 17 or something crazy like that in that game, and they were outshot from 3 by a wide margin. They lost that game at home in game 3, but they came back last night, and boy, did they make shots. They actually doubled up the Warriors from 3-point range, outscored them by 30 points. They made 23 pointers, shot just under 50%. The Warriors only made 10. Didn't really shoot the ball well. So, yeah, the 3-point disparity, not only in this series, but in the playoffs as a whole, if you're winning the 3-point line, and this is the NBA today, then you're winning games. And that has been a huge factor for the Mavericks, is not only Luka, hitting shots, but other players hitting shots as well. Reggie Bullock had a historically bad game in game 3, came back last night, and I believe made 6 3-pointers. He bounced back just like that. And that's a key sign of growth for me, for this Mavericks team. On the Warriors side, we all know what this Warriors team presents. It's going to be hard for Dallas to beat them 3 more times in a row, in my opinion, 2 of which will have to be on the road at the Chase Center. But the Mavericks have shown already this postseason that if you get a little cocky, if you show a little apathy, don't really play as hard, get a little sloppy on both ends of the floor, they will make it tough. They will be a tough out. They will not go down without a fight. And so I think for the Warriors, it's something that I think kind of has plagued them at times during the Steve Kerr era, is they've been so dominant at times. They've gotten up in these series, and they get a little too. And I know you've won 3 championships. You've been the dominant team of the past half decade or so. It's been great. But I just think in some of these opportunities to sweep, opportunities to close out, they've gotten a little too overconfident in themselves, and it's come back to hurt them at some times. So just get back to what you do, that championship pedigree, move the ball. I'm sure Klay Thompson will make shots. Steph Curry will do his thing. Draymond Green will do his thing. Kevin Looney, I don't think we can go this podcast without mentioning what he's been doing. He's been absolutely fantastic, especially in games 1 and games 2. What he did on the glass, what he was doing on the defensive end of the floor, all that stuff, his impact has been, can't go without, mentioning that. And then also, of course, the play of Otto Porter Jr., who just recently hurt his foot. That's not great for the Warriors, but, he's been great as well. So I just think maybe the Mavs, they did get a couple games in Phoenix, right? They know, if they shoot the ball well, they always have a chance. They have probably the best player in the series. But I don't know. I just think the Warriors, they're going to be back in the finals. And we'll get to the East here in a minute, but I think we're trending in a direction where we're going to get a Warriors-Celtics finals. And I think we've been trending in that direction for a couple weeks now.
Right.
With just some of the breaks that Boston has gotten, and of course what the Warriors have been doing. But that's not to say to take any credit away from what the Mavs have done. I'm not going to lie, and I don't think you tell me, but not a lot of people thought that the Mavericks would be here in the first place. So it's great that they've gotten here to this point. But I'm kind of rambling at this point. Just be on the lookout for 3-point shooting, because the team that shoots better in this series has been winning the games. Obviously, keep watching Luka Doncic and his brilliant play. And then the Warriors, their motion offensively and that defense, with Kevin Looney in the middle of it, has been fantastic. And I believe if they make the finals, they're going to get Gary Payton back. So that'll be huge as well.
Right. And one last thing I want to say before we move on is the one thing that the Mavericks can take away from this playoff run is I think we absolutely reached our our ceiling as a team this playoff run. I think Western Conference Finals, for you can ask most Mavericks fans, was the ceiling for this team, and we reached that. And I think in hindsight, I actually think the Luka Doncic injury in the first round actually helped this team. If you look at the way um, Jalen Brunson played in those first 3 games of that series, as well as some of the other guys on that team, and the confidence that was built in those 3 games, I think that has really helped throughout this playoff run. And um, seeing Jalen Brunson blossom the way he has this playoff run is really exciting. And I'll get into the offseason stuff with the Mavericks in a future podcast, but I just want to end it with this. I think Jalen Brunson has to be priority number one this offseason, re-signing him to whatever number he desires.
I agree with that. Absolutely. And I think that's part of a youngest team learning the ropes of the playoffs. Your best player goes down, those players gotta step up. And it sounds cliche, but it showed itself right at the beginning of these playoffs with the Mavericks, and that really helped those players start to feel comfortable. And then Luka comes back. It took a little bit, but now he's back in his groove. You have arguably the best player left in these playoffs of the 4 teams. And you have a supporting cast that has largely done a great job. And a head coach, I mean, I don't think we can go without mentioning the job that Jason Kidd has done as well. I don't think either of us expected this. Some of the adjustments that he's been able to make defensively, we can dive into that at a later point in time. And obviously, we'll be talking about the offseason extensively here once the finals concludes. But great job to Jason Kidd and the Mavericks for getting to this point. I think that's a great point that you made. They maximized their ceiling this season. Okay, they got a good, what now looks like a pretty good return for Porzingis, and that really, I guess, transformed their season. And of course, the Luka injury. Now that I wouldn't say he's fully healthy because I think he has a shoulder issue or something like that, but he's healthy enough to be the player that he needs to be. And it's been great. So hopefully they win another game. They make it hard for the Warriors. Maybe a game or two. Take this to game 7. Who knows? I mean, what's happened so far in these playoffs, you never know, but we'll see. But let's talk about the East now.
Right.
The East. We're tied at 2. Same thing. What have you seen? What are you sort of projecting? I mean, now it's basically a best-of-3 series. Game 5 is tonight. And what have been the keys so far for each team?
Yeah. I just want to say this series is giving me like strong. Sorry for the PTSD. This is giving me strong 2013 finals vibes. Just with the way each game has trended, it's been nothing but blowouts, but it's been alternating each game. That's kind of how that series went as well. Until game 6, there was not really a close game in that entire series. It was all blowouts. But
Right.
getting into the actual analysis, I mean, just the shot creation, the lack of shot creation that Miami has when Tyler Hero and Victor Oladipo struggle. It really ends up falling on the shoulders of Jimmy Butler too often, in my opinion. And that's really become their Achilles heel. A lot of their offense throughout the season has been, DHOs, dribble handoffs with Bam Adebayo and these spot up shooters, Duncan Robinson, Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, all those guys. And in the playoffs, that offense gets taken away completely. And without the ability to put the ball on the floor and create for yourself in those late shot clock situations, It's become a big issue for this Miami Heat team. And whenever the Celtics have gone to their switching, they've dominated in half court defense. And they've been in drop coverage here and there. And I'm not too sure why that is. They've been in drop coverage with Daniel Tyson there, obviously, and with Al Horford at times. But whenever they've gone to drop coverage, that's when the Miami Heat get their looks off. And I think I got to give credit to Ime Udoka for making that adjustment going into Game 3 in Boston, because I think that's where the series shifted. Um, obviously they didn't end up winning that game, but in the second half, they dominated defensively. With the obviously Jimmy Butler being out playing a huge part, but um, it was clear the defensive impact that made, and I think going into these next, possibly 3 games, that's going to be the difference in the series. That's why I'm going to pick the Celtics to win in 6 or 7.
I agree with you. Now, to start this off, this isn't going to be necessarily revolutionary analysis or anything, but
Right.
there's a reason all those pundits all these years have talked about and made those cliches about the postseason when the game slows down being a war of attrition. Health. I think this series has been the perfect example of that. I mean, to me, it's going to be who plays and who doesn't play each team going down the stretch. We've seen basically almost every player on the Heat roster be questionable or out for one of these games. It seems like. I know that's an exaggeration, but it seems that way. Kyle injury. We now saw Jimmy Butler is dealing with something. Tyler Hero is dealing with something. He missed the last game. The list goes on, right? And then for Boston, Marcus Smart, the heart and soul of that team, the defensive player of the year, missed game 1 with the right foot sprain. He exited game 3 with the right ankle sprain, and it cost him game 4 as well. You know, he, you know, he's tough as nails, sure, but when you have a guy like that who's dealing with a flat tire and is not really, fully
Himself.
effective to that
Right.
extent, then yeah, he's not himself, then it could be trouble. But it hasn't really been all that devastating for Boston. And then, of course, Robert Williams and so on. So I think health, who plays and who doesn't, and who's effective and who's not, of course. And again, this isn't revolutionary analysis by any means, but that's going to play a huge factor. Now, let's talk about things that we do know. From a Boston perspective, really just from a series perspective, I've been watching the matchup between Bam Adebayo and Time Lord, Robert Williams. If you didn't notice, in Game 3, Bam Adebayo had a huge game, probably his best game of the playoffs. He went for 31 points, 15 of 22 shooting to go along with 10 rebounds, 6 assists, 4 steals, and a block. He just had a monster game. Miami won that game. But that was the game that Robert Williams did not play. Now, in Game 4, Bam Adebayo didn't have nearly the game, just 9 points, 3 for 5 shooting, 6 rebounds, more turnovers than assists in just 28 minutes. Now, that wasn't all necessarily attributed to Time Lord's presence, but there's certainly statistics that prove that Time Lord has been the difference maker that we all thought he would be, to maybe even a bigger extent than we thought with this nagging knee injury that he's coming off of, the meniscus tear. His presence has been felt by the Heat offensively for sure. If you look at the numbers, certainly with Bam Adebayo's production, with Time Lord off the floor in 75 minutes, he's averaging 17.7 points per 36 minutes with about 8 rebounds, 4 assists, and just under a turnover per game. He's plus 18 in the plus minus. When Time Lord is on the floor, his averages go way down, 11.4 points per 36 minutes. He's not nearly attempting as many shots. His rebounds go down, his assists go way down, and he's a minus 27 in the box minus or plus minus box. So if you look at the Heat, they're scoring just 97 points per 100 possessions with Time Lord on the court in this series. That would have ranked as the worst offense during the regular season in terms of efficiency. And the Celtics have now outscored Miami by 33 points in a total of 67 minutes that Robert Williams has played this series. And when Robert Williams doesn't play, the Heat are plus 5 in the 125 minutes. He's either on the bench or hurt. So, look, I think that's certainly, if both players are on the floor and playing, certainly something I'm watching going forward. Do they have an answer for Time Lord? Can they figure out that riddle defensively? And then if you look at the trend of the series, a lot can be contributed to the massive swings of momentum in this series. Of course, it's been back and forth, back and forth. Available personnel, the health that I talked about earlier is certainly a factor. The tweaks in scheme, adjustments by both coaches have been a factor. Deferring levels of execution. But, at the risk of stating the obvious here, when you're facing two excellent defenses like both these teams are, you can't afford to squander your own possessions. And if you look at the trend, game one, Miami committed fewer turnovers. They grabbed more offensive rebounds. They attempted more field goals and free throws. They won the game. Game two, Boston committed fewer turnovers. They took more free throws. They won that game. Game three, Miami committed fewer turnovers. They took 22 more shots. I believe they shot more free throws. They won the game. Game four, Boston, I believe they were even on turnovers, but they were able to get more possessions by grabbing more offensive rebounds, taking 24 more free throws, and they won that game. So really, you can boil it all down to, regardless who's playing, taking care of the ball with these two defensive teams, getting on the offensive glass, getting those extra possessions, being smart, taking good shots, and making your free throws, getting to the free throw line. I mean, that's really what you can boil this down to when you look at the trend so far this series. So, look, I don't know who's going to be playing. Hopefully, everyone's healthy here for the last couple games. But I do agree with you. Boston is just the better team. They have more talent. They have more individual shot making. And I do think that, with some undrafted players who certainly deserve credit playing for the Heat, a little more experience on that Boston side. And I do think the Heat were in the finals just a couple years back. I do think there's more pressure on Boston's side to get to that finals that we've all been waiting for them to get to. So I do think Jason Tatum being just named All-NBA first team, along with Luka Doncic, Devin Booker, Jokic, and Giannis, it's his job to bring him home. Let's see it. Like, I know you're a great player. You have my respect, but let's see it. Let's see you get to the next. Let's see you take that next step. And he's dealing with something with his shoulder that he suffered in Game 3. So hopefully he'll be able to, be Jason Tatum. But I just believe that same thing as you, that Boston has more shot makers. They're just a more talented team. They're going to be able to make more shots at the more timely situations. So I think Boston wins in 6. That's my prediction. I think they win tonight. They go back home and they close it out in Game 6.
Right. That's definitely the ideal scenario for Boston. You can't afford for this to go to a Game 7 because we know in that scenario anything can happen. And Obviously, the more games you end up playing in this series, the more chance you have for more injuries and more things that can uh, not go your way. And one last thing I wanted to say with Boston is if they are to move on to the next round, the one thing that I am concerned about is their offensive consistency, just overall as a team. Obviously they've been um, pretty good overall shooting the three ball as a team, but they do go through shooting droughts where they just don't score the ball for entire like 5 minute stretches of play. And in the playoffs, those stretches can be the difference in a game. And Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have been shouldering a lot of the load in terms of the playmaking duties and the scoring duties. But I think moving forward, I look toward Marcus Smart as being that third scorer that they can count on. I think in order for them to win the championship, I think Marcus Smart has to average at least 15 to 16 points per game. That's my big key for them. They need that third scorer, and they need that to be a consistent guy that they can count on.
Absolutely. We'll see what happens. We'll be back talking about it. And we'll probably preview the finals at some point when that comes around. But with that, if there's nothing else to be said, just to be clear, I'm going to have the Warriors winning. This is so tough. I want to have a prediction on the record. I have the Celtics in 6, and I'm going to have Warriors in 6. I'm going to give the Mavs another game. But who knows? Do you?
Okay. I'm gonna say Warriors in 5 and
Okay.
Celtics in 7.
Okay. Fair enough. So just predictions on the record there. But with that, let's move on. Baseball. So, real quick standings check here. We're almost to Memorial Day, and Memorial Day, which comes up here on Monday, is historically the time where we can officially look at the standings and start thinking about things. Up until now, it's really way too early. There's not as much of a sample size to take things super seriously. But now we've got a pretty good sample size. We're about a quarter way through the season. We're about to enter the summer months of baseball, June and July. We'll be at the All-Star break before you know it here in about a month and a half or so, a little under that. So it's time to start really ramping up our baseball coverage. But real quick standings check. I'll run through it really fast, and then I'll ask you to just give your overview of who you think at this point is looking good in terms of title contention, World Series contention. Who you think has been disappointing, or a few obvious candidates for that, and then just your overall takeaways from so far, what you've seen or what you've heard about. But in the AL East, we have the Yankees 30-13, first team to 30 victories. We have the Rays right behind them, 25-17 through about 42 games. And then the Blue Jays, who we'll talk about here in a minute, been a little bit disappointing to this point, 23-20, only 3 games above 500, 7 games back of the Yankees for the division. In the AL Central, we have the Minnesota Twins leading the division, 27-16. They're off to a fantastic start there with Carlos Correa, sort of changing the culture there in some ways. That pitching staff has been way better than I expected so far. We have the White Sox not right behind them. They're actually been a struggle bus so far. 21-21, playing 500 baseball to this point. Not necessarily what you expected from them, but we'll talk about them here in a little bit. And then you have the Guardians, Tigers, and Royals. Who cares? And then the AL West, the Astros are really killing so far. The 63% winning percentage. They continue to play Houston Astros baseball. The Carlos Correa loss has not really affected them. 28-16 with the Angels right on their tail. 27-17. That's going to be a race to watch down the stretch. In the National League, the Mets are absolutely dominating the NL East. It's a one-man race at this point, 29-16. And with the injuries that they've suffered to their star pitchers, I mean, that's incredible. NL Central, the Brewers and the Cardinals, kind of as expected, are the two good teams in that division. 27-16 for the Brewers, 24-19 for the Cardinals. And then finally in the NL West, we have the Dodgers, who started a little bit slow, but they've heated up recently. 9-1 in their last 10 games. 29-13, right behind the Yankees for the best record in baseball. And then the Padres, who without Fernando Tatis Jr. have been absolutely fantastic so far. 28-15, only 1.5 back of the Dodgers, with Tatis soon to come back. And then the Giants have been fine, 23-19. They're certainly not out of the division race yet. Only 6 games back. That can change with one series. But yeah, they've been good as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to you. With what you've seen or what you've heard about, what do you think so far? Contenders, disappointments. Go ahead.
Um, well, in terms of contenders, obviously, I'll start with the AL. It has to start with the Yankees, number one. Um, they've been completely dominant, and it seems like the struggles that they had last year with hitting at times have been completely fixed. They've been way more consistent. They've been um, not just consistent. They've been explosive. They've absolutely dominated, and their net rating is amazing. And then second in the AL, I'll have to say the Houston Astros, just because they've been there and done that. They've lost a few guys to free agency, obviously, but the farm system that they have, the pitching that they have, the experience that they have, it's still there and it's still evident in the way they play. Um, they're disciplined defensively. They they don't really give up. Every time that they play, that they're at least going to be in the game. They don't really get blown out. That's not something that they do. With the pitching staff that they have, that they'll have a chance against anyone. Um, and that's really it for the AL. Obviously, before the season started, we had the Blue Jays, up near the top. Obviously, teams in the AL East, we knew that would be a really important race. But the Red Sox have started kind of slow, and the Blue Jays they haven't been quite as dominant as we would have thought. I still need to wait out on those teams in terms of being contenders. That's where I stand with the AL currently. And then the NL, um, obviously you have the Dodgers and the Mets at the top. The Dodgers, obviously, with all of the star power that they have, similar to the Yankees, um, just it's really just the star power and depth that they've built over the past few years has been extremely well documented. Obviously, um, stars up and down the roster, quality role players up and down the roster. It's really not much more you can say there. Their lineup is fantastic. Their bullpen is fantastic. Their starting pitching is fantastic. And then the New York Mets. Um, right out of the gate, that team has just gotten off and running. Um, I mean, I think they lost Max Scherzer recently, so that gives me a little bit of concern. Obviously, he's their ace. He needs to stay healthy for them to be, you know, um, true contenders. So that's one thing. That's one area where I pause a little bit. Um, but those are the two contenders to me in the NL. Um, all the other teams, I think, are either a step down or need to prove to me that they can you know go on a run of wins in the regular season. I think for the next tier of teams in the NL to win the World Series to me or get out of the NL, to me, those are the teams that would have to get super hot at the right time, like the Braves did last year. Late in the year, July, August. That's when they got to get hot. That's when they got to get healthy. Um, and as for disappointing teams, to me, I think it's hard to be too harsh on the Giants so far this year, but they have been slightly disappointing. There's a team that won over 100 games last year, won the NL West, I believe, and I think had the best overall record in the NL last year as well. So it's been interesting to see that they've been, just hovering slightly above 500 for most of the season. And then the defending champion, Atlanta Braves, they've been hovering below 500 for much of the season. They haven't found much consistency, and they've just been up and down the whole year. They haven't had a win streak of more than 2 games to start the season. So just the consistency there, it's a little bit concerning, especially now that they have uh, what's his face, their star player. Help me out here.
Acuna.
Acuna, right? How could I forget his name? Wow. But especially since they have Acuna back, that's been a little bit surprising. Um, my other disappointing team, I guess you could say the White Sox. You could say the Red Sox. I mean, the Red Sox obviously being in the toughest division in baseball in the AL East, well, arguably the toughest. I think they still have time to get hot, and they had a good week this past week as well. So I think there's still a lot of time there to where they can go on a run. Um, but that's it. That's about it for disappointments to me.
You bring up some good points. And I generally agree with you. I guess we can start with disappointments. And then we'll get to contenders. To me, a team that I was really high on coming into the season that has just really struggled. Their pitching staff hasn't been great. They called up their top prospect. He's been good, but they just and maybe they've been better than their record shows. They've had a tough schedule here to open it up, but the Seattle Mariners right now sitting at 18-25. This is a team that, won over 90 games, or I think they won 91 games last year, missed the playoffs by just a game or two. Well, they were expected, they got Robbie Ray in the offseason. They made some big moves in the offseason, to get, I'm forgetting his name right now, the guy from the Reds. They improved their lineup. They call up their top prospect to be sitting at 18-25 right now, fourth in the NL or the AL West, behind the Angels and the Rangers. It's kind of surprising to me, disappointing. But this is why we talk about this. They haven't really got any production from their young players. Jared Kelnick, who was the guy that called up last year, they have a really deep farm system. Has not been great and was just in fact sent back down to the minors after hitting 140 for the first 30 games of the season. The bullpen has really been a struggle bus. They have the second worst bullpen ERA in the entire league. That can't, I guess, last. If they want to get back into contention, they certainly have time, but they just have been disappointing to me. I expected them to be in a better position here, about 40 games into the season. But look, they have Robbie Ray. They have some great young arms in that rotation. Logan Gilbert is one of them that I know. Ty France and J.P. Crawford are both very good players, solid veterans that I think will steer this team in the right direction. And Julio Rodriguez has started to heat up here, the young prospect that they called up, the center fielder. So I do think the Mariners have time. Just get back to 500, over 500 by the All-Star break, and you'll be fine. But they've certainly been disappointing to me to this point. And then the other one that really stands out to me is the Chicago White Sox. Look, you're trailing the Minnesota Twins by, I believe it's, how many games is it? Let's see. 5.5 games. And you were, in most people's eyes, picked to win the AL this year. It was them and the Blue Jays. Those were the two favorites in Vegas coming into the season. And yes, Lucas Giolito, their ace of their pitching staff, has yet to pitch this season. Well, guess what? The ace of the New York Mets, Jacob deGrom, has yet to pitch this season, and they are killing it. So what's the difference? You both have great lineups. You both have bullpens, and you both have deep rotation. So what's been the difference so far? I think some of the hitters have been disappointing. They just haven't been great so far. But they are 500, and they can easily heat up here. They just got blown up by the Red Sox last night. That wasn't good. Their bullpen needs help, certainly. But they've been one of the more disappointing teams. I certainly expected them to be in a better position. And then, of course, the Red Sox have been sort of disappointing. They've really heated up here in the past 10 games. They just swept the Mariners. And they beat up on the White Sox last night. They're 8-2 in their last 10. They were, 10 games below 500, really struggling. But now they've gotten themselves in a better position, 20-22, and they're only 2 games back of the Blue Jays right now. So they're certainly heating up. And Chris Sale's been out, so once he comes back, they could be in a much better position. For all these disappointing teams, look, it's a long, long season. You have time to get back. Certainly target the All-Star break to get back around 500 or over 500. And then after the All-Star break, you, of course, have the trade deadline to go out and make moves, decide if you want to buy or sell. So that can also help some teams. If you need bullpen help or you need another guy in that lineup, a left-handed hitter to balance out your lineup, or maybe even another starter. There's certainly things you can do to improve your team here, but those are the main disappointments. Now, in the NL, there hasn't really been any real disappointments. I would say the Braves, but the Braves did the same shit last year, and they won the World Series, so I'm not really going to harp on that too much. And other than that, the teams are kind of right about where I expect them to be. I think you say the Giants just because they won 107 games last year. I think they've kind of regressed to the mean just a little bit, but they're still really good. I think they'll still probably be in the playoffs. Maybe not just this year as a division winner. I still think they have the veteran presence and the pitching staff that you need to get there. But yeah, that's really as far as it goes with me for disappointments. And certainly those teams have time to figure it out. Now, for the contenders, I certainly agree with you in the AL. I'd probably add in, I don't think you can discount what the Rays have done so far.
Right.
They just keep losing guys and keep winning games. And given the fact that they've been in the ALCS, 3 of the past 4 years, they've been to a World Series. Even though they don't have those household names, aside from Wander Franco, the young shortstop, I don't think you can really count them out as a real contender. I think people just forget about them because they're down in a small market. It's not, a flashy team. They just go about their own business. But I'd certainly put them in that category as well, along with the Yankees in the AL East. And I think so far the Blue Jays are a step down. But the Yankees, it's been really good so far. Um, the starting pitching has been fantastic. They have the best starting rotation ERA in the American League. Tyone and Montgomery and the supporting cast, Nestor Cortez, Luis Severino coming back. He's stayed healthy so far. He's been great. All five of their starting rotation, all five guys have an ERA under 3, and that's absolutely insane. And that's with Garrett Cole not being great so far. He's been really good, but he hasn't been great like ace Garrett Cole so far. So if he returns to that form, we'll see where that goes. But the pitching staff is fantastic. I think this is the first time in years as a Yankees fan where I can really feel comfortable about all 5 guys that we have in our rotation. And it's enough of a sample size to say that. I mean, all 5 guys have made 6, 7, 8 starts so far. So I think that's about 1/4 the starts they're going to make for the season, and I think it's a large enough sample size for me to say that. And the bullpen, up until recently, has been great as well. When you have all 3 phases of the game clicking on all cylinders, and your team is hitting home runs at the rate that they're doing, you're going to win a lot of games. And they found other ways to score. And they're doing better hitting with runners in scoring position, all those situational things. They're stealing bases. They're just, doing it all. And give credit to Aaron Boone. I think he deserves a lot of credit. He's been managing more aggressively. Past years, it's been, okay, it's early, it's May. This game really doesn't matter. We can get away with losing this one. We don't really have to show that sense of urgency right now. Chapman, will leave him in. He can blow this game, whatever. This year, it's been different. This year, it's been, okay, he let a man on. Let's pull him right now, get this guy in, and let's put out the fire right now, and let's win this game. It's just been a shift in attitude so far. The Yankees certainly, hopefully they can keep this up. And then the Astros. Look, they're the Astros. Justin Verlander is early favorite for Cy Young once again, coming off that Tommy John surgery, hadn't pitched in almost 2 years, and now has a 1.3 ERA or something crazy. He's been fantastic. Almost threw a no-hitter a couple weeks back, but he did throw a complete game shutout, I believe. The Angels, I need to see a month or 2 more before I put them into that contender category, but I think they're just a step down. They're coming. They signed Noah Syndergaard in the offseason. Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani have both stayed healthy so far, and the other guys are performing. Jared Walsh, Anthony Rendon, who ever since they signed him a couple years back as their third baseman has been underwhelming, but he's been good. They're just finding ways to win games, and their pitching is better this year. And if they can go out the trade deadline and acquire a couple more bullpen arms to kind of fortify their bullpen and maybe another starting pitcher, watch out for the Angels. And then I look at the AL Central, and you have the Twins and the White Sox. I expect the White Sox to be in this contender tier by the end of the season, but they aren't right now. The Twins, I believe, are in that same category as the Blue Jays and the Angels right now, which I think you kind of alluded to. And I think the Mariners can get there as well. They'll get there eventually. I think they have the team to do that. Not the contender tier. I'm talking about that next tier, where you could certainly see them making a run in the postseason, but you don't have that level of confidence that you have with teams like the Yankees, the Rays, and the Astros. If that makes sense.
Right.
And then real fast in the NL, the Mets have been dominant. Jacob deGrom has been out. He's coming back soon. He's been out. Once they get him back and they get Scherzer back at the same time, they're going to be really tough to beat. And Pete Alonso, I mean, if we're going to talk early NL MVP candidates, he certainly deserves to be on that list with what he's been doing what he does best, and that's hit bombs. The Brewers, it's tough with the Brewers. They certainly have the pitching staff and the bullpen to get it done in the postseason. The question for me is that offense, the offensive inconsistency in the postseason has been something that I just need to see more of before I put them in that contender tier, but they're right on the edge. They're really close. If they can go out and add another effective bat or two at the trade deadline, I think I'd put them in that category. And then I think right now it's just the Mets, the Dodgers, and the Padres right now in that NL contender category. The Padres have obviously been great so far, 28-15 without their best player. And then the Dodgers, who started slow, but, continued to crush with the all-star team that they have. Mookie Betts has hit like 9 home runs in his last 20 games. I think the Giants could get there, the Brewers could get there, but right now I think it's just the Mets. And the Braves could probably get there. But right now I think it's the Mets, the Dodgers, and the Padres in that World Series tier in the NL. In the AL, I have the Yankees, the Rays, just because of their track record, and the Astros because of their pitching staff and their lineup, which is still super deep in that contender category. And then just below those teams in the AL, I would have Blue Jays, the White Sox, the Twins, and the Angels, probably the Mariners. And in the NL, I would have I already kind of talked about it. So, yeah, I think that's really what it comes down to so far.
All right. Yeah. Appreciate you guys watching. That's going to do it for episode 105. A couple housekeeping things. We do have some Patreon podcasts planned up ahead here pretty soon. I believe we're doing a QB bracket of all 32 QBs. We put them in a bracket. We're going to be dropping that on the Patreon, but we will drop that on YouTube if this video gets to 5 likes. So if we get 5 likes on here, that would we will drop that video onto YouTube and make it free access. And a couple other things. My setup right now, it's really plain, but I will have stuff up behind me for the next podcast. So stay tuned for that. I'll have the setup ready to go. But we had to kind of rush this one out. But thanks for bearing with us. Thanks for listening, guys. Be sure to leave us a 5-star rating and review if you're listening on your listening platform. And I'll let Michael sign us off.
Just one more thing to add to that. I think we're going to do something along the lines of what we were planning to do before the offseason began. We're going to go through all the teams and we're going to recap the offseason, basically. And do something along the lines of grades or something like that. That should be fun. And then, of course, as he mentioned, we're going to have more Patreon content. That quarterback bracket will be coming soon. We might have to modify that a little bit with what's happened the past couple of weeks. But, yeah, we'll have that. And then we'll probably have some other stuff. The college football world has been weird lately. We'll touch on that. Then college baseball. And certainly more basketball and MLB. So be on the lookout for all that. But as we always say here on the Raw Prospect Podcast, just like Mito Pereira's chance of winning the PGA Championship when he hit the ball in the water on 18, we are going. Peace out.
Peace out, guys.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to click on one of these 2 videos right here. Our latest video right here on the left, or the video YouTube recommends for you on the right.